Toxoplasma gondii is a microscopic parasite that can literally erase fear from the brain. And right now, as you are listening to this, it is living inside roughly 2 billion people on this planet. That is nearly 1 out of every 3 humans walking around with a mind-altering organism nestled in their brain tissue, and most of them have absolutely no idea. This is not science fiction. It is one of the most well-documented parasites in all of modern medicine. First discovered over 100 years ago, and what researchers have learned about it since then is terrifying and fascinating in equal measure. So let's start with how this thing actually works, because the mechanism is diabolical. Toxoplasma gondii is a protozoan parasite, not technically a bacteria, but something arguably more sophisticated. It can infect virtually any warm-blooded animal on Earth, but it can only reproduce inside one type of host: cats. Members of the cat family are the only animals where this parasite completes its life cycle. So Toxoplasma has a problem. It needs to get inside a cat, and its favorite way to do that is through rats. Here's where it gets wild. When a rat becomes infected with Toxoplasma, the parasite enters an aggressively replicating active form called the tachyzoite stage, before eventually converting into bradyzoites, the dormant cyst form that settles into brain tissue. And once those cysts take hold, something remarkable happens. The rat loses its fear of cats. Not just a little bit, completely. That innate, hardwired terror every rat is born with, that instinctive panic at the smell of cat urine, just vanishes. And it doesn't just vanish. It gets replaced with attraction. Scientists call this the fatal attraction phenomenon. Infected rats are actually drawn to the scent of cat urine. Researchers at Stanford, led by Robert Sapolsky, found in 2011 that infected rats appeared to be sexually aroused by cat scent, and that the parasite cysts were concentrated specifically in the medial amygdala, the brain region that governs both fear and sexual behavior. The rats would walk right up to a cat, fearless and curious, and get eaten, which is exactly what the parasite needed all along. The rat dies, the parasite gets inside the cat, and the cycle starts over. As parasitologist Laura Knoll at the University of Wisconsin put it, Toxoplasma clearly manipulates the crap out of its host. Now here's the question that should be keeping you up at night. If this parasite can rewire a rat's brain, what is it doing to ours? The numbers alone are staggering. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates over 60 million Americans are currently infected. Globally, the pooled prevalence sits around 31% of the entire human population. In parts of the Americas, that figure reaches 45%. In France, seroprevalence rates in cities like Paris have approached 87%, and Brazil consistently sits above 60%. And remember, most infected people show 0 symptoms. The infection is silent, and it is permanent. Once Toxoplasma gets into your brain, it converts into that latent bradyzoite cyst form, evades your immune system, and resists every known drug. It is there for life. William Sullivan, a professor of pharmacology at Indiana University School of Medicine, described it plainly. After a host is infected, the parasite forms cysts throughout the body, including the brain. Those cysts cannot be eradicated by any known drug. They persist for the host's entire life, and they have been linked to behavioral changes, pushing people to do things they normally would not do. So what kind of behavioral changes are we talking about in humans? This is where a Czech scientist named Jaroslav Fleger enters the picture. Fleger is an evolutionary biologist at Charles University in Prague, and he has spent over 30 years studying what latent Toxoplasma infection does to human behavior. Prominent psychologist E. Fuller Torrey put it simply, Fleger is very much a pioneer in this area, and Torrey does not know anyone else in the world doing what he is doing. And what Fleger found is genuinely strange. Infected people show subtle but measurable personality shifts that intensify the longer they have been infected. And here is the twist. The parasite affects men and women differently. Infected women become more trusting, more warm-hearted, and build more social connections. Infected men go the opposite direction, becoming more asocial, more suspicious, and more withdrawn. Both groups, though, show increased risk-taking behavior. Studies have linked Toxoplasma infection to higher rates of car accidents, greater impulsivity, and even rage disorder. In 2018, researcher Stephanie Johnson at the University of Colorado Boulder published findings that caught everyone off guard. Students who tested positive for Toxoplasma exposure were 1.4 times more likely to major in business, and 1.7 times more likely to focus on management and entrepreneurship. Among professionals attending entrepreneurship events, infected individuals were 1.8 times more likely to have started their own business. Johnson's explanation was elegantly simple. New ventures have high failure rates, so a fear of failure is quite rational. Toxoplasma might just reduce that rational fear. The parasite is literally making people less afraid to fail. And here's how it pulls that off at the neurological level. Glenn McConkey and his team at the University of Leeds discovered that Toxoplasma gondii carries the genes for two enzymes needed to manufacture dopamine, the brain's reward and motivation chemical. The parasite is essentially running its own dopamine factory inside your neurons. Infected brain cells release 350% more dopamine than uninfected cells. 350%. That's not a subtle nudge. That's a neurochemical hijacking. That dopamine connection has also raised serious questions about mental health. Research from the Stanley Medical Research Institute found that the link between Toxoplasma infection and schizophrenia is stronger than that of any schizophrenia-associated gene variant identified in genome-wide studies. Among neuropsychiatric patients globally, infection rates sit around 38%, compared to 25% in healthy controls. There's also a chimpanzee study worth knowing about. Researchers found that infected chimpanzees lost their fear specifically of leopard urine, but not of lion or tiger urine. The reason is simple. Leopards are the natural predators of chimpanzees in their rainforest habitat. Lions and tigers do not live there. The parasites seem to know the difference. If Toxoplasma can manipulate chimpanzee behavior with that kind of precision, it is hard to argue it is not doing something similar in us. But there's genuine hope in this story too. In 2015, William Sullivan's team at Indiana University discovered that an old blood pressure medication called guanabens, approved by the Food and Drug Administration, could dramatically reduce Toxoplasma brain cysts in infected mice and, critically, reverse the behavioral changes. Sullivan called it a big surprise and a potentially very important discovery. By 2024, his team had established that the behavioral recovery correlated with decreased neuroinflammation, specifically reduced levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-2 that the parasite triggers in brain tissue. A combination therapy using the compound ELQ-334 with pyrimethamine reduced brain cyst burden by 95% in mice, approaching the limit of detection. That's not managing the infection anymore. That's potentially eliminating it. So what can you do right now? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends thoroughly cooking all meat to safe internal temperatures, washing fruits and vegetables carefully, wearing gloves while gardening, and keeping sandboxes covered. Transmission most commonly occurs through undercooked meat or contact with oocysts, the environmentally hardy egg-like stage that infected cats shed in their feces, which is why cleaning litter boxes is a known risk factor. Congenital toxoplasmosis, where a pregnant woman passes the infection to her developing fetus, is one of the most serious public health concerns tied to this parasite. It can cause severe neurological damage, vision loss, or miscarriage. And that is exactly why the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advises pregnant women to have someone else handle litter box duties entirely. Here is what this all adds up to. There is a parasite that has been quietly reshaping human behavior for as long as we have existed alongside cats. It erases fear, floods brains with dopamine, and may be influencing everything from personality traits to career choices to mental health outcomes in billions of people worldwide. And until very recently, there was no way to get rid of it once it settled in. The fact that a treatment breakthrough may finally be within reach after more than a century of research is genuinely exciting. But in the meantime, roughly 1 in 3 people you will ever meet may be carrying a tiny organism in their brain that is subtly, silently changing who they are. That may include you. And we've seen how a parasite can hijack your brain to erase fear. But what if the good kind of brain control comes from a completely different source? Up next, we look at a strain of gut bacteria that outperformed prescription antidepressants in clinical research. It's the opposite of Toxoplasma, a bug that actually makes you happier.